Bill Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer? Guys, what are we doing here? Welcome back, everyone. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 75. My name is Zain Bando. Thank you so much for joining me as we close the month of January. It is Friday, January 30th, 2026. Thanks so much for tuning into this new edition of the show. I greatly appreciate your guys' support and just understanding of all of the changes that we've gone through over the last several months, just with some other shows and stuff. But this one has always been the constant, has been since April of 2024, and things aren't slowing down anytime soon. So before we get into any of the major topics for today's program, just a few quick reminders. Please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the ETB Network. You can do so at youtube.com/ETB Network. You can also listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow the show across social media at Bando's Breakdown, and you can follow me at ZainBando99. For those of you on the audio only side, that is at ZAINBANDO99, no caps or spaces. And of course, on the video only side, you can see that scrolling across the bottom of the screen. All right. With that out of the way, just a few reminders before we get started as well. For those of you who may have never seen me before, my name is Zain Bando. I'm a sports journalist and an ETB Network co-host. So for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is basically a show about the topics in my wheelhouse that I deem important. So for those of you who don't know me or my scope of my work, I cover mixed martial arts. I cover college football and college basketball, and I also cover a little bit of the WNBA, but primarily stick to college football, NFL football, and the UFC, along with the broader scope of MMA. But I try to really hone in on the UFC just because that's the biggest promotion in the entire sport, and it's the one that I follow the closest. And there's a lot of people who believe that when you cover this, you should always start with regional MMA. I'm a little bit different than that. I've pretty much always, ever since I've been doing this, I've always covered the UFC pretty much. So, again, to each their own though. So that's sort of a little bit about me. You can find my work on several different places. You can find it over at the Sporting News. You can find it over at several Sports Illustrated sites, Field Level Media, and a bunch of other syndicates as well. You may know me formerly from the likes of Fansided, BJPenn.com, Men's Journal, Mike Farrell Sports, and a few others. But now I've really honed in on just a couple of different sites, a few different national brands as well. So for those of you that have followed me since the beginning, which would have been 2019 in the journalism space, I greatly appreciate you. For those of you who have just found out about me within the last year, either from some of the events I've attended or some of the stories I've written, thank you so much for reading me. And again, for those of you who only follow me for the show, welcome back. It's the same great Bando's breakdowns that you're used to, and we've already made some massive improvements because on today's show we will have yet another guest for the second consecutive week. So stay tuned for all of that. That's going to be really fun as well. With that said, that is the intro piece out of the way. Let's get into Zain's overview now. And it is a big show because we have a lot to discuss. So here's what we're going to be talking about in a succinct nutshell here. As it's a big show, it's an important show. Just because we're getting closer and closer to the Super Bowl. This is the week off between Championship Sunday and the Super Bowl from Santa Clara. I'll tell you who made the Super Bowl in just a little bit if you guys don't already know. But we will be talking about the Big Ten football schedule releases. We'll go over some of the major schedules of some of these teams. We may not go over every single team, but I will give you a 30-second synopsis on what I think of pretty much every schedule. If we have time to get through it, I have all the teams kind of mapped out. So if we get to all of them, great. If we don't, we'll go by chunks for the next few weeks if need be, based on the vibes of what's going on. But we'll talk about those. We're going to talk about who's in Super Bowl 60. I'll give you my NFL record going into the Super Bowl. I'm not going to give you a pick yet, and the reason why is because we're going to do it a little bit closer to the game. So you'll have to tune in to not only episode 76 next week, which will be the first episode in the month of February, but you will also have to tune in to the live edition of Football Forecast, which is going to be a week from this Friday. So next Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern everywhere, we will be previewing the Super Bowl. And then on Sunday of that week, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. You guys know me for Zain Zinger Part 2. What we're going to be doing is we will be combining Zain Zinger Part 2 with Gridiron Gurus. So the two shows that are back-to-back on the channel will be coming together for a full-on Super Bowl preview. So my Zain Zinger rundown for that week is going to be altered a little bit to accommodate Gridiron Gurus. So stay tuned for that. More details to come. And yeah, that's how you're going to get my Super Bowl pick. So without further ado, let's get into the show now. So the Big Ten football schedules are officially out for all 18 programs. They were released on Tuesday afternoon by the Big Ten Conference in collaboration with the Big Ten Network. And again, that's all 18 conference schedules for the 2026 Big Ten college football season. And it is a loaded calendar. And I talk about loaded calendar, I really mean it. So let's go through some of these schedules. And again, I'm going to show you guys who's all in the Big Ten, because it's not really the Big Ten anymore. It's the Big 18, and that is all 18 programs. Again, let's go through them. Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, USC, UCLA, Rutgers, Maryland, Washington, Nebraska, Northwestern, Minnesota, Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin. And without further ado, let me just double check and make sure I did this correctly. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. We have all of them accounted for. Sometimes it's hard to remember all of them, but I think we got all of them covered. So let's go over some of these schedules as well as we kind of take a way too early look into what could very well be one of the biggest Big Ten, and that is not I apologize. Did not mean to make it a pun there or a play on words, but it could literally be one of the biggest Big Ten seasons ever. And as we take a look at some of these schedules, I want to reveal to you guys that it was also revealed on that show that Big Ten Football Media Days will be back in Chicago. It's been a very long time since Big Ten Media Days were in Chicago. In fact, I was at the last one that took place in Chicago. It was pre-COVID in 2019. So I'm very excited to go back to that. That'll be really cool. I always enjoy Big Ten Media Days. I'll get into Big Ten Media Days a little bit more as we get closer. But Big Ten Media Days, and this is no disrespect to anyone who puts the event together. The event's a great event, but the pre-COVID Big Ten Media Days were truly special events. I'll get into why that is in a little bit, because full disclosure, Big Ten Football Media Days are now only reserved for media, which is a little bit disappointing. I'll get into what it used to be in a future episode, but very, very excited to hear about that it's in Chicago. It's not in Indy. It's not in Vegas. It's, to me, where it should be every year. And this is not my bias showing through. Literally, it should be in Chicago every year, because if you think about it, it's the third biggest media market in the country, and a lot of those schools can get to Chicago. Outside of the West Coast schools, it's kind of a trip for them, but most of those schools can get to Chicago with no issue whatsoever. So they moved it around a couple years now. It was in Indy, it was in Vegas a year ago, and now to see it back in Chicago, I think is really exciting. I think it's going to bring a lot more media members out. I haven't been to the Big Ten media days as media since 2022, so it'll be nice to finally end a 4-year gap of having not gone to it. So I'm really excited about that, and I think it's one of the best events of the whole year. And I'll explain why when we get there in a little bit. But I just think knowing what the schedules are now, I think is a big deal. And it's only January 30th at the time this is being released. But still, I mean, it's never too early to get excited about college football or just football, period. And yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of this. So let's get into some of these schedules here. All right, here we go. So let's take a look at some of these schedules. All right, let's start here. This is from ESPN. They put together a great schedule release post on Tuesday evening. And in fact, at the time this is being released, if you go on the sporting news right now, I'll have covered almost all 18 schedules. We're putting them out in batches at the moment. So if you go on sporting news at any point, you'll see every schedule that's up there from me. I don't go into predictions, but I at least tell you who's playing who and all that good stuff. So let's go through some of these conference matchups for some of these schools because I think some of these games are going to be critical. So starting from the top here, we're looking at Illinois to start. So Illinois opens its conference season in Columbus, Ohio, against Ohio State on September 26th. Obviously, Illinois lost this game last October in Champaign. Could be a huge game for Illinois. If Illinois is 3-0 going into this game, it could be a game where if Illinois wins, it's ranked. Or if Illinois loses a close game, it's still ranked. Unsure if Illinois will be ranked in the first AP top 25 poll. It seems like a lot of the national outlets are discounting Illinois again, despite Illinois winning 9 games in 2025. So that's yet another 9+ win season for Brett Bielema. I think it's because of all the talent Illinois has lost that maybe a lot of people don't value them as much as they should. But I can tell you that if Illinois is 3-0, they'll be playing for a ranking for sure going into that game. Then just taking a look at some other games, they have Purdue at home. It's Barry Odom's first trip to Champaign. It's Purdue's coach. Illinois dominated Purdue in West Lafayette last season, ran the ball really well. And then a game that I think a lot of people aren't circling but should circle. You have Michigan State, who obviously just hired Pat Fitzgerald as its new coach within the last month and a half or so. This is a huge game for him as he's back in the Big Ten for the first time since the 2022 season. Could that be a trap game for Illinois before its huge game against Oregon and Dante Moore? Because, looking at the schedule realistically, I'd say Illinois is 3-1 after Ohio State. Illinois, should in theory should be 5-1 going into the Oregon game, still with much to play for as the season gets into the second half. So maybe the Oregon game is a swing game in regards to Illinois' potential CFP hopes, because I think minus the Maryland game, 2 out of those next 3 games, Oregon and Nebraska could decide Illinois' season in regards to the playoff. And then, of course, they end the year with a road trip to UCLA. UCLA really isn't the tough place to play that it used to be, but it does have Bob Chesney, and Bob Chesney is a good coach, another first-year coach trying to rebuild UCLA. And then, of course, it's the game that I think a lot of Illinois fans are circling. Finally, the rivalry is renewed, Illinois versus Iowa. Brett Bielema versus his old employer in the Hawkeyes and Kirk Ferentz should be a huge game. A lot of people have Iowa as a CFP sleeper with who they have returning and who it might get in the portal. So that's an interesting game. And then, of course, it ends the year with Northwestern, more than likely in Northwestern's new stadium. And the big question every year is always, could Northwestern be playing for a bowl game? I think it's very likely possible, given that it now has Aiden Childs at quarterback. So I'll see what happens with Illinois. But right now, at first glance, let's go through a way too early prediction. I'd say 3-0 to start the month of September. You lose the game to Ohio State, but it's a close game. So I'd say you're sitting at 3-1. You beat Purdue, you beat Michigan State. You're 5-1 at that point. You lose a really tough game to Oregon. You beat Maryland. You beat Nebraska. So now you're sitting at 7-2, right? And then you look at the last three games, and this could decide the year. But I think way too early prediction. I think Iowa wants to get that one back. So I'm going to say, from an optimist standpoint, this looks like a 9-3 team again. But the games that could trip Illinois up as possible trap games at Michigan State. Michigan State hasn't beat Illinois in a really long time. If Michigan State beats Illinois, it'll be the first time in 10 years that it'll have done so. Nebraska, this is like a put up or shut up year for Matt Rule. It no longer has Dylan Rayola anymore, right? Because he's now at Oregon. He's going to more than likely be the backup to Dante Moore there. So Nebraska, a lot of question marks there. And then the other game where, it could be a trap game too. I think Northwestern is always a trap game because regardless of how good or bad Northwestern is, Northwestern always plays Illinois well. It sort of treats it as its Super Bowl, if you will, the Land of Lincoln Trophy. Northwestern hasn't won that in a couple years, so they'll want that back, and it could very well determine whether Northwestern goes to a bowl game, like I said. So overall, this is a good schedule. Illinois avoids some huge heavyweights. They avoid Indiana, they avoid Michigan, they avoid USC, who obviously, it beat last year, and they avoid Washington as well. So, there's a couple of games on here where you're not really sure, but I think the big one in non-conference to circle is, of course, Duke. And yeah, we'll see how Illinois fares, but I think this is a good schedule. I think this is certainly a bowl team at a minimum. 6-6 would be a failure, but I think anything that's 7 wins or above would be a success for Bielema as they look to win 3 bowl games in a row, or better yet, if things break its way, go to the CFP for the first time, because I think Bielema has to do it at some point in his tenure. I don't think he came to Champaign not to go to the CFP at least once. Maybe this is the year Illinois surprises a lot of people, but again, as I alluded to, things have to break right, and maybe you upset Ohio State, and maybe you're talking about a totally different season where maybe 11-1 is on the table, but then I digress. So that is Illinois' schedule at a glance. Looking at the defending national champion, Indiana Hoosiers. No disrespect, but 3 cupcakes out of the gate, should be 3-0. North Texas, Howard, and Western Kentucky. Then you get Northwestern in your Big Ten opener. That's probably a win as well. Then you go to Rutgers. That's probably a win as well. Then you go to Nebraska. More than likely a win as well. The game to circle is October. Here's the stretch right here that could define Indiana's season. It is October 17th when Ohio State goes to Bloomington. That's a massive game. Then the next week they go to Ann Arbor and play Bryce Underwood in Michigan. You don't think Kyle Whittingham and Bryce Underwood are going to be ready for that? Damn right they will be. Then you look down the barrel, mid-November, USC comes to Bloomington. Those 3 games could define whether Indiana either goes undefeated or goes to the CFP. So let's go through these. I like the first 6 games to be wins. I think they're 6-0 after 6-0 going into Ohio State. Something tells me that Jeremiah Smith is going to play with a chip on his shoulder all year. Okay, something tells me he did not return to Ohio State to not win a national title. I think it's a national title or bust type season for Ohio State. Give me Indiana to lose its first game in over a year against Ohio State on October 17th. I think it wins the Michigan game and the Minnesota game, but the Michigan game is closer. USC gives Indiana a game. I think it barely squeaks by Washington and it beats Purdue. So I'm going to say this is a 11-1. This is an 11-1 team. I think its only loss is to Ohio State, and I think it rematches Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. That is my prediction for the Hoosiers. All right, looking at Iowa, a lot of people think this is a college football playoff dark horse. I'm going to say it's 2-1 after the first 3 games. I think Iowa State always plays them really tough. So I'm going to say 2-1. It drops the next 2 games to Michigan and Ohio State. So we're sitting at 2-3. It goes to Washington, wins that game. Goes to Minnesota and wins that. So now you're sitting at above 500 at that point. Then you host Wisconsin. I think you win that. Then you go to Northwestern. I think you can win that. So now you're bowl eligible. Um, I think this is a 9-3, 8-4 team. I really do. I just think that Iowa State game is tough. That Michigan game is one to circle. That Ohio State game is one to circle. Going to Washington's not easy. I think a lot of people are looking at Iowa and they're thinking college football playoff sleeper because of who they might be, getting and Kirk Ferentz's experience and all that. But when you look at this schedule, it's a very difficult schedule to figure out. So I'm going to say 8-4, 9-3, somewhere in there. That's my way too early pick on Iowa. Maryland. Okay, this is a major question mark because a lot of people think Mike Locksley should no longer be the coach. So I'm going to shoot it to you straight. 2-0 to start. They lose to James Franklin in Virginia Tech in week 3. They'll lose to Nebraska. They'll lose to Ohio State. It'll beat Rutgers. It'll lose to Illinois. I'm going to say one of Purdue's few wins on the year is going to be against Maryland at home. So I'm going to say they lose that. They beat Wisconsin. They lose to USC, and they lose to Penn State. This is a 3 or 4 win team at best. More than likely, they will fire Locksley at the end of the season. All right, Michigan. I'm going to say 3-0 going into Iowa. I think it beats Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is a good team, but I think going to Ann Arbor is just different. So 3-0 beats Iowa to get to 4-0, beats Minnesota, beats Penn State, loses to Indiana. That's its first loss of the year. Beats Rutgers, beats Michigan State, loses to Oregon, beats UCLA, loses to Ohio State. This is a 9-win team for the Wolverines. 9-3. All right, Pat Fitzgerald's first season. What do we got here? So I'm going to say 2-0 to start. Lose to Notre Dame. That's 2-1. Loses to Nebraska. That's 2. 2-0, 2-1, 2-2. I'm going to say beats Wisconsin. So 3-2. Loses to Illinois. 3-3. The Fitz Bowl against Northwestern. I think this is a great game, but Michigan State drops it. So 3-4. At UCLA, I think they win that. They're 500. Huge game. Could define the season. At Michigan, at the Big House, I'm going to say they lose that. So they're 4-5. So all you still need is 2 wins to make a bowl game. Can they get those 2 wins? The answer to that question is yes. I do think they can win at least 6 games. And I think out of its final 3, it'll beat Washington and it'll beat Rutgers with a loss to Oregon at home. Let's take a look at Minnesota. All right, Minnesota will be 3-0 out of the gate. It's Big Ten openers against Washington at Washington. I don't love it. So let's go 3-1. Loses to Michigan. So they're 3-2. At Purdue, wins that game. So Minnesota's 4-2 versus Iowa. As I alluded to, Iowa shouldn't win that game. So I'm going to say they drop that. Lose to Indiana. So that's 2 losses in a row. Beats UCLA. I'm going to say they beat Penn State because it's Matt Campbell's first year, and I think he's going to lose a lot of close games. And I think it wins the final 2 against Northwestern and at Wisconsin. So that's a bowl eligible team at the very least. Okay, Nebraska. I have no idea what's going on with its quarterback situation, but nonetheless, here are my predictions. So 3-0 beats Michigan State at State. Good game though. So 4-0. Beats Maryland to get to 5-0. I'm going to say they lose the next 4 games. So they're going to start 5-0, and then they'll lose to Indiana, Oregon, Washington, and Illinois. Then they'll beat Rutgers to become bowl eligible because I said 5-0, so they'd be 6-4 at this point. Lose to Ohio State, 6-5. I think this is a 6-6 team. Unfortunately, I think it's an underachieving Matt Rule team, and I think the Nebraska faithful is going to be calling for his head by the end of the 2026 season. That's my bold prediction out of Nebraska. All right, David Blood with a new look offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly. How will they do? So they'll beat South Dakota State. They'll come back in the fourth quarter and knock off Deion Sanders in Colorado. It's going to be a great game. I'm excited to hopefully go to that game. For whatever reason, and I don't understand this, Northwestern's bye is in week 2, which I don't understand. And by the way, another common trend with a bunch of these schedules is no double buys for some of these teams that we're going through. So that's interesting as well to note. All right, let's keep it moving along so we can go rapid fire. So I'm going to say they win the first 2 games, lose to Indiana, lose to Penn State, beat Ball State, beat Michigan State, beat Rutgers, lose to Oregon, lose to Iowa, lose to Ohio State. I'm going to say lose to Minnesota and lose to Illinois. Not a great conclusion. All right, Ohio State, can they go to the CFP? All right, Ball State, that's a win. Texas and Arch Manning, I think they barely pull it out. Kent State, that's a win. So they're 3-0. Illinois, that's a win. That's 4-0. Iowa, that's a win. That's 5-0. Maryland, that's a win. That's 6-0. Indiana, that's a win. That's 7-0. USC, that's a win. That is 8-0. Oregon, I'm going to say they lose to Oregon. It's the only game they lose all year. Okay, so 8-1. Northwestern, 9-1. Nebraska, 10-1. Michigan, 11-1. So you're going to get 2 11-1 teams in the Big Ten championship game. That's my prediction. All right, Oregon. They win the first 3 games. I'm going to say they get upset by USC. They beat UCLA. They beat Nebraska. They beat Illinois. They beat Northwestern. They beat Ohio State. They get upset by Michigan. They beat Michigan State, and they get upset by Washington. So I'm going to say this is a 10-2 Oregon team, and I think it's going to be a surprise to a lot of people. They're going to be in the thick of the Big Ten title race. Going into that, last couple weeks of the year, and they'll fall short. All right, let's keep going through these here. Penn State, 3-0 to start, beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten opener. I'm going to say they beat Northwestern, but it's close. USC, they lose that. Michigan, they lose that. Purdue, they win that. At Washington, they lose that. Minnesota, they lose that. Rutgers, they win that. And Maryland, they win that. So bowl eligibility is a major question mark. If Matt Campbell can win 5 or 6 games, I think it's a successful season. Purdue. Now, this is hard to quantify because Barry Odom's team may have not been very good, but they were in a lot of close games. So let's see how I think they do. Indiana State, they win that game. Let's start there. Wake Forest, I'm not sure how good Wake Forest is going to be, but let's say that Purdue wins that. All right, so Purdue's 2-0. At UCLA, it's a huge road test, but I think it loses that. Notre Dame is just too good. A lot of people think Notre Dame could be a national title contender. I would say they lose that. So now they're sitting at 500. Then they go to Illinois. I think they lose to Illinois. Okay. Then they host Minnesota. I think they lose to Minnesota. So now you're sitting at 2-4. Then you play Washington at home. I think you're a 2-5 football team. Okay. At Penn State, you're probably 2-6 if things don't break away the right way. Maryland, I think you win that. So now you're 3-6, and you got to win out to hope you can go to a bowl. And it's not going to happen because Iowa is going to win at Iowa against Purdue. So I'm going to say they lose to Iowa. They knock off Wisconsin in a massive upset, and they lose to Indiana. So this is a 3-4 win team. But again, Barry Odom is going to have his guys ready to play. It's not a bad football team. It's just a few years away. It's as simple as that. All right, Rutgers. You never know. Let's take all the stakes out of it. How are they going to do? UMass, they win that at Boston College. I think they find a way to lose that. So Rutgers is 1-1, loses to USC, beats Howard, loses to Indiana, um, beats Maryland. I just think they're a better coached team. Loses to Northwestern, loses to Michigan, beats Wisconsin, loses to Nebraska, loses to Penn State, and loses to Michigan State. I just think this Rutgers team is not very good. Okay, UCLA and Bob Chesney's first season. All right. At Cal, that's a loss. Versus San Diego State, that's a win. Versus Purdue, that's a win. At Maryland, that's a win. At Oregon, they lose that. Versus Wisconsin, they win that. Versus Michigan State, they probably win that. Nevada, not sure, but I'm gonna say they win. I'm gonna say they win. At Minnesota, they lose. Illinois, they lose. Michigan, they lose, and USC, they lose. All right, USC and Lincoln Riley. This is a college football playoff dark horse. Everybody's talking about this is finally the year that USC can get it done. The question is, can they? Luckily, they have Mayava coming back, so that is gigantic. All right, Fresno State, they win that. Louisiana, they win that. At Rutgers, they win that. Versus Oregon, they lose that. Washington, they win that game. At Penn State, I think this is a squeak by win. At Wisconsin, they probably win that. Versus Ohio State, they lose that. At Indiana, they're certainly losing that game. Maryland, they'll win. UCLA, they will win. All right, Washington. All right, so Washington State, it'll win that. Utah State, it'll win that. Eastern Washington, it'll win that. Minnesota, it'll win. USC, they'll lose. Iowa, it'll lose. Purdue, it'll win. Nebraska, it'll probably win. Penn State, it'll probably win. Michigan State, it'll win. Indiana, it'll lose, and at Oregon, it'll lose. So that's not a bad year. All right, Notre Dame at Lambeau Field for Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin loses that. Western Illinois win. Eastern Michigan win. So now you're at 2-1. You lose to Penn State, you're 2-2. You beat Michigan State, probably you're 3-2. You lose to UCLA, you're 3-3. You lose to USC, you're 3-4. You lose to Iowa, you're 3-5. You're probably a better team than Rutgers, but again, you just don't know with this Wisconsin program. Can Luke Fickell figure it out? I don't know. That's a huge question mark. I'm going to say they win that game. Maryland, they win. Purdue, they should win. Although that's a game that's at Purdue. Maybe Barry Odom coaches a master class. And then Minnesota at the end of the year, who the heck knows? They'll probably lose that game. Even though it is the Axe game, they may get up for it. All right, that's the entire Big Ten slate for every single team. Thanks for letting me ramble on for about a half an hour as we went through all the teams. We got to do what we got to do. Again, I told you this is going to be a fun episode, so let's keep it rolling. All right, who's in the Super Bowl? In the Super Bowl this year is the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. Let's take a look at my NFL conference title round record. We were 1-1 straight up, 0-2 against the spread because we took the Patriots and the Rams. So, of course, New England won to go to the Super Bowl. So we got to let that count for the straight up record. We were 0-2 against the spread, though, because New England did not cover the number against Denver. 6-6 against the spread in the playoffs. 44-21 if you count the Blitz overall record as well. And 182-101 straight up. Not ready to give you guys a pick just yet, but I figured I would give you the records. That way you guys know what in the world is going on. All right. Very quickly, Dana White admitted this past week that he knows nothing about Conor McGregor's contract stipulations, which I don't buy for a single second. It is absolutely preposterous that he doesn't know anything. He knows everything. He knows what's going on with Conor McGregor. He's just not ready to announce it yet because he doesn't have an opponent for him yet, and he insists that Michael Chandler is not the right fight. So simply put, take it with a grain of salt. Conor McGregor released some training footage the other day saying that he's 100% locked into the White House card. So I think an announcement within the next 10 to 14 days is imminent. And I think we're going to get a Conor McGregor opponent very, very soon. All right, let's give this card the attention it deserves. UFC 325. I thought we were going to have time to recap UFC 324. But if you want a full recap of UFC 324, check out the most recent edition of the MMA Outsiders that dropped yesterday. We were live across several platforms yesterday, myself and Jack Gold, for a new edition of the MMA Outsiders. We went over the whole card. To be fully transparent, we went 7-4 on the card. It wasn't that bad, but we were 2-3 on the main card, hoping to do a little bit better this weekend, as the fight is from Sydney, Australia. Alexander Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopez in what should be a great fight. Volkanovski looking to defend his featherweight title once again, this time in an immediate rematch against Lopez, who unbelievably finished John Silva at Noche UFC this past September. It maybe isn't the fight that everybody wants to see, but it certainly is an exciting fight. I like Volkanovski to win by decision again for a few reasons. Number one, he's in his home country. Number two, he already knows how to beat Lopez. And number three, he's just overall the better fighter. The experience factor is unbelievable. And Volkas finally has his wits about him again. He had lost a couple in a row to Makhachev and to Poirier. It looked like he was on the downswing, and he fought really well against a really tough guy in Lopez, especially in rounds 4 and 5. So I really like Volk in this fight. I think his gas tank is better. And I just think overall he's on a mission to defend the title as many times as he can. He's been kind of talking about retirement, hinting at it here and there. I don't think he's fully done yet. I think he knows that he still has a few more fights left to prove that he's, the greatest featherweight ever without a shadow of a doubt. Some people already think he is, but I think him beating Lopez again would separate himself from the pack, and I think it's very important to note that as well. So I just really think overall it's going to be a good fight, and I really like Volk to win this fight by decision. We did preview the full card on Thursday, and again, if you want my picks on social media, those will be released on Saturday, a couple hours before the event, so stay tuned for those, and I'm sure you want to check those out because I think there's going to be some good picks on there. Same time as usual in the United States, again, only on Paramount Plus. If you're not already subscribed, you should be, because you get every UFC event the whole year, fight nights, numbered events, the whole thing. You know the drill. So stay tuned for Saturday's event as well. It's the last numbered UFC until March. So let's hope the fighters on the card make it count, and hopefully it's a really, really good fight. So excited to talk about this more when we recap it next week. But overall, though, I think the UFC is off to a decent start in this Paramount deal. All right, a few more before we get to the special guest. So, one thing I saw, Caitlin Clark's NBC announcement. This is gigantic because Clark is obviously a major figure in the world of just women's sports, right? And I think that's really important to note because Clark is someone who has a lot of influence on a lot of people. And we're talking influence as in just overall influence. And when I say that, I more so just mean that regardless of what position you put her in, she will succeed. So I think her being a part of the NBA broadcast now, moving forward, at least until the CBA agreement either goes through or doesn't go through, I think is really important. And I'm excited to see what she can do because overall, I think she's a really, really, really good ambassador for not just women's basketball, but the game of basketball in general. And I'm excited to see what she is able to do moving forward. Really looking forward to her development and just everything that she has going on, because I think she's someone, that a lot of people can tune in for. A lot of people are always excited to hear what she has to say. And I think she's one of those players and just athletes in general that has a lot of influence and a lot of power. And I'm excited to see what she can do with all of her brand new just accolades and everything she has going on and just how she's trying to build her personal brand. All right, let's move on. We have two zingers this week because I felt like they were too big not to talk about. I think Paramount Plus has some explaining to do about the UFC launch. And I kind of talked about this past week. Um, it's pretty simple. Paramount Plus has not fully released the entire fight catalog for the UFC. That's a major flaw because people are subscribing to get the full woe of everything. And when you don't have the full woe, it creates false illusions for new fans. I'm sure a lot of people that don't know the UFC very well probably think it started in 2000 when it really didn't. It started in 1993. So the UFC has to fix that. That's major in my opinion. That's something that I don't think a lot of people are really talking about. At least somebody brought it up to Dana White at the post-fight press conference this past Saturday after UFC 324. But let's see if the UFC actually acts upon it. I'm not really sure if it will or not. But what I can tell you is I think it is going to be important moving forward to watch whether the UFC actually listens to the fans, because if the UFC doesn't listen to the fans, the UFC will have some explaining to do, and that won't be a good look for them moving forward as the schedule continues. And then just briefly, Bill Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Guys, what are we doing here? We're talking about the greatest coach of all time, and we understand that, the end of his Patriots tenure wasn't very good, and we also understand that his North Carolina coaching stint has not been the best, but we're talking about a guy that has a body of work that few human beings can even remotely touch. I don't think that's fair to him at all. The voters who didn't vote for him on the first ballot should be ashamed of themselves. And it had to have been a biased vote because you can't just ignore Belichick's past body of work and say, yeah, he doesn't deserve to be first ballot. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think a lot of people should be holding themselves accountable, and I don't think it's right. And again, as I alluded to, what are we doing here? When the fans know it's wrong, some of the voters have to know it's wrong too. And I don't think it's right from an NFL standpoint whatsoever. And Belichick deserves his due, and hopefully one day he will be able to get it. No errors this week, which I'm really, really happy about. And now it is time to transition because I had a special guest come on the program as well. I was very excited to talk about this within the last week or so. But the special guest you are going to hear from is the new head coach of the Chicago State University Cougars. Should be a fun time with Bobby Rome II. He was unbelievable to speak with. And again, I just want to say before you guys watch or listen to the interview, he was unbelievable. Just had a great sense of personality, connection. The culture he's trying to build is really, really awesome. So thank you so much to Coach Rome for his time. Very much looking forward to seeing who the season opener is going to be again. So without further ado, here's my sit-down conversation with the new head coach of the Cougars, Bobby Rome II. You guys won't want to miss it. And afterward, we will wrap up the show. So stay tuned, guys. Thanks. Welcome back. This is another Bando's Breakdowns exclusive. This week it's episode 75, and I'm very glad to be joined by new Chicago State Cougars head football coach Bobby Rome. Bobby, how are you today?
I am doing awesome, doing amazing. Glad to be out and about recruiting, kind of trying to close up the back end of our 2026 class. So our coaches have been working extremely hard. So I'm out here meeting some of the Chicago coaches, local coaches. So I'm excited.
Very excited to hear all of the head coach. And again, thank you so much for your time. And I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're really busy. So I'm going to jump right into questions. The first question I had for you was sort of what made Chicago State the right fit overall, and just kind of how do you feel that you were the man to lead Chicago State into a brand new era of football, a new era that's unprecedented, and just start something totally new?
Well, first and foremost, when I look at coaching as a calling. God told me my calling was right here at Chicago State University, and I couldn't agree more. just the potential here at Chicago State, the acres of land that they have so much room for growth. The administration that I'm working for currently, Dr. Monique Carroll and President Z. Scott, have been nothing short of phenomenal. And those are the type of leaders that you want to work for when you're looking at taking on a project this big. When you're looking at coming to a city like Chicago, one of the biggest cities in the world, one of the biggest, fastest growing cities in the world as well, so many different communities, I just wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part any way possible. My gift right now is coaching football. So if coaching football is a way to get myself integrated with the people of Chicago, so be it. I love it here. The people on the South Side here became like family. They've been treating my family like family. So, the sky's the limit, and we're excited to kick off in 2026.
It's really awesome to hear. Can you kind of take me back a little bit and just kind of tell me that I'm in sort of, or at least a summarized version, just to kind of how you got into this position and just overall what attracted you about the job and just taking on an undertaking that a lot of people I think have a lot of questions about, and it seems like you're the man for the job to answer those. So I'm curious for you to expand upon that a little bit more if you could.
Okay, well, to be very transparent, I've heard everything. I heard a lot about the South Side of Chicago. Just being when I was the head coach at Central State University, we had recruited a lot of students from the city of Chicago. Majority of them coming from the South Side of Chicago, and some of the things that they would speak about, the gang life here. And then they'll come and speak about also just how community driven that the community of the South Side was. When I found out there was a Division I university on the South Side of Chicago, I found it out back in 2022, and I've always been intrigued by Chicago State. Same school Kanye West made the college dropout, and the same school Donda West spent 30 years at. So I've always been a Kanye West fan as well, and it was one of those things where, hey, I felt like this school had a lot of potential, and I felt if they ever started football, I wanted to make sure I put myself in the best position to be the person to lead that program. I've been all over the country coaching football and all over the world, Russia, Miami, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina. Now I'm here in Chicago. So I just thought, hey, why not go to the biggest city in the world, and spread my ministry there. The people here are great. I think that football, they have some outstanding football players, some outstanding athletes here in the city of Chicago, and I just believe it's an untapped territory.
For sure, and I'm just curious because you don't usually hear about this too often. What was coaching football in Russia like? Because when I was doing some research in that part of your story, I was really curious, and I wanted to hear just a little bit more about that before we move on to some other stuff as well.
Well, I'll say coaching football in Russia is a very unique experience. You're taking a bunch of young men who basically, just know what they've seen, on YouTube about football, and you're taking those young men experiences and you're pretty much, trying to teach them the game from scratch. I think the best part about that transition was we were dealing with a lot of coachable young men who wanted to learn a game of football at the time, and they were willing to put in as much time as it takes to do that. So, I enjoyed my time over in Russia. I spent three full years over there developing the sport as an ambassador, going to city to city doing master classes, and I got to kind of hunker down and spend the last 2 years there at Far East Federal University, where we kind of started college football there at the university, and it was an unbelievable experience, dealing with young men who never played the sports before, but just had a love and a passion for what we did here in America. That's you got to understand, you were all the way in Russia. All the things that we hear about, Russia and the United States, and to hear that they had a passion about a sport called American football. And, I love football. So we had a moment there. We shared a moment, and that moment lasted 2 years, and it was amazing experience. And those tools are going to help me build this program here at Chicago State. because I'm coming in a brand new environment, a very cold environment,
Yeah.
very, very cold environment weather-wise. And, these kids are very eager about playing Division I football, having an understanding of what Division I football is, and just the opportunity to build this together with the community of the South Side and in the city of Chicago. Everywhere I go, when I meet people, they're excited about football here in Chicago, Division I football here in Chicago. So, it's for me to be able to bring that to the forefront or help bring that to the forefront is just a blessing. And I'm very thankful that Chicago State has chosen me to be the head coach.
That's awesome. And kind of piggybacking off because I think that's very interesting to know. What would you say has been the most rewarding part of us essentially building a program in your or image, just given that it's the start of something brand new and you want to sort of bridge the gap between also not just the community, but bringing in players that you feel will fit the mold of your program. So just to kind of add to that, what would you say at least so far has been the most rewarding part about is just building something new and building something that you can truly say is yours?
For sure. Well, I think some of the most rewarding thing has been just the faith that's been shown in myself. And I'm talking about from my administration, Dr. Carol, Monique Carroll, my athletic director, from President Z. Scott, our president, and our chairman as well. Starting there, with their trusting me, with so much responsibility of starting a Division I football program here in Chicago. The community, backing me and supporting me and trusting me and giving me very positive words when they do see me that, Coach, we're behind you. We got your support. We got your back. Those things right there have been so rewarding to me. The faith, faith builds character. You know what I mean? So we're building character here on the South Side, every day. When we believe in something that's not there, I'm talking about a whole community. We believe in something that we can't even see, right now, but we know it's going to come, and we're putting our best foot forward, and we know it's going to change the South Side of Chicago forever. So just the faith that I'm seeing manifested right now in the community, and on our campus, and with our coaches and the players that's coming in. These players are coming into nothing. They're coming in, and they're coming in to pour the concrete of this foundation here. They're coming to pour the concrete. And that means a lot. That means a lot to me. That shows the faith they have in Chicago State. It shows the faith they have in this coaching staff. It shows the faith that they have in this institution, and the leaderships in this institution overall. So that's exciting. That's exciting to know that there's people that's willing to bet on Chicago State.
Or it's kind of with that said, given that it is your first season coming up, what would be considered a successful 2026 season when you look back on it in late November and early December and say we accomplished X? What do you hope? What do you hope that is as a springboard into the 2027 season?
Well, I'm gonna be very transparent. I'm gonna be very, very blatant when I say we're here to win football games. We're not here. This is not a Chicago Boys and Girls Club. Success would be winning. Winning football games here. We believe that we can get that done, and we're going to show that in our preparation and how we prepare for the upcoming season. So, talking about it ain't going to get it done. It's going to be about us getting our guys in the weight room, getting them conditioning up, and getting them ready to go. So I'm excited about that next phase of our project, and it's going to take more than just being out here doing this. We got to put the work in. We got to bring in the student athletes that understand our vision, that's willing to buy into our vision, and we're confident that we're doing that right now as we speak. So right off the bat, of course, kicking the football off, making history is going to be very important, not only to the city of Chicago, but to the community on the South Side. But we're here to win football games. Make no mistake about it. We're here to win football games. We're here to send a statement across the country that Chicago is a football playing city, and we're not here to play.
And would you say that in most of the mindset, we're not here to play things like, would that be considered your pitch to students and alumni to come out and see your games this fall, or is there a little bit of a bigger underlying message there than just that alone?
Oh, 100% is a much bigger message. We're building a legacy here for our young men. across this campus. We're building a legacy. Every young man that commits and buy into this situation, they understand this is not a 4-year situation. This is a 40-year situation here. They're
Right.
buying into the legacy of building something and something to call their own. So when I talk about pouring the concrete, meaning that when they show back up in this campus 20 years from now, they'll be known for the guys that poured the concrete for the first Division I football program, not only at Chicago State but in the city of Chicago. That means something. That means something. No one could take that from anybody here. That's going to be a part of the people, part of the concrete pours here at Chicago State. So my fans, the fans of Chicago State, the community, we're buying into the legacy part of this thing. Like, we understand what this means for our grandkids. We understand what this means to our children. We understand what this means for our community going forward. We understand what the first Division I football program means to one of the biggest cities in America. So we are carrying that flagship. We are running with it, and we're looking for big things to come out of Chicago State because of football.
For sure. And maybe you can't fully answer this for me, but do you have any sort of idea, at least how much you can share as to who you guys might be playing week 1, or are you not ready to talk about that yet?
Right now, we can't. We're going to have a schedule release that'll be very soon. For us being a first-year program, being that we are a first-year program, everything is monumental for us. You know what I mean? When we release the first schedule, it's a celebration because we got the first inaugural schedule in Chicago State football history. And I let me tell you this: when you do hear who we play opening game, it's gonna blow the tops off the city. It's
Okay.
gonna blow the tops off the city, and I want the whole city to pack the house and come on out and let's watch some good football and let's crown somebody city champs.
So are you telling me that once the schedule comes out that even I may be interested in coming to the first game too?
Oh, you're gonna want to be there. You're gonna want to
Uh,
be there. You're gonna want to be a part of what's going on. You're gonna want to be a part of history.
It makes me feel very excited, and I'm sure something else that gets you very excited as well is the final question that I have. How excited are you to join the NEC in 2027? And what does it mean for you overall, knowing that you guys will be a part of a conference very, very soon?
We are thrilled and excited. We're so thrilled and excited. Like, all our recruiting, everything that we're doing recruiting wise is recruit for the NEC. We're recruiting to prepare to compete for the NEC. We're not just bringing in guys just to bring in guys. We're recruiting prepared to compete in the NEC and to represent Chicago State in the right way, and also to represent the city of Chicago in the right way. So we're very excited about our opportunity to play in the NEC, and we're very excited to bring our talents from Chicago down to the Northeastern Conference and see, what that looks like mixed up with some of that Northeastern talent up there. So bringing some of that Midwest talent to the conference.
For sure. And just to kind of wrap everything up a little bit in just the final few minutes here, any final words or any last pitches you'd like to plug as moving forward as we get closer to the spring and eventually the summer and fall? I will give you the final word, Coach Room. Thanks again for your time.
No problem. Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for having us on your show. Thank you for having us a part of your podcast. That's first and foremost. Chicago
I appreciate
State.
that.
No problem. No problem. We want to make relationships all over the city. We want to make relationships all over the city. We understand the flagship that we're carrying here at Chicago State, and we just want everyone to be a part. Be a part. Let's buy in. Let's be a part of what we got going on in Chicago State. It's just not just a South Side thing. This is all a Chicago thing. We have something to be proud of. This is our first Division I football program in the city of Chicago, and we're gonna do everything we can to make the city proud. We're gonna bust our butt on a daily basis. We're gonna get these kids that want to be a part of what we got going on here in Chicago, and kids that want to be a part of what we got going on from outside of Chicago and Illinois and Indiana to come be a part of this beautiful thing that we're doing here on the South Side. So I just want to thank you, and go Cougs.
Yeah, for sure, man. And it's cool that you have the vision that you want to recruit the Midwest like no other, because that's truly the heart of it. And if you want to play in a true football city, it doesn't get any more real than Chicago. And I think that's really, really awesome. And and I wish you the best of luck moving forward. And thanks again for your time, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much. You have a blessed day.
You as well, and good luck on the rest of your recruiting trips, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. You stay blessed.
So with that said, that's going to do it for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in this week. I greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you so much to Coach Bobby Rome and Chicago State for making that all possible. To chat with him, looking forward to August. But with that said, though, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Be sure to follow on social media at Bando's Breakdown. Subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network while you're at it. And of course, listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. And that will wrap up episode 75 for everybody here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. My name is Zain Bando. And again, until next week, I hope you have a good one. Enjoy your week off of football as such. And we will be back to preview Super Bowl 60, which is the Patriots versus the Rams. Or, the Patriots versus the Seahawks. By the way, for those who don't know, Patriots and the Rams was my Super Bowl pick. But nonetheless, Patriots, Seahawks next week. Be sure to tune into that for episode 76. But for now, have a good one, everyone. Thanks again, and I will see you guys soon. Cheers.